A lot has changed in Barrie since the last official plan was approved in 2009. The pandemic has shown glaring holes in housing affordability. At the same time, Barrie also saw a big rise in the number of people moving from the GTA in search of cheap housing. The city began the process to develop a new official plan in fall 2018. Since then, numerous meetings have been held in councils and communities to get the feedback. Various suggestions related to climate change and affordable housing have been incorporated into the draft plan. The new plan needs to think 30 years into the future and outline how the city will support the 300,000 people and 150,000 jobs by 2051. It includes the land needs assessment to better utilize the land to incorporate residential and commercial needs. It will encourage mixed use of land in development. After more than 3 years of process, the City Director of Planning, Michelle Banfield, made an initial presentation to the Council. The Council will publicly debate the plan in 3 weeks, but this week, Council members got an opportunity to ask questions and make suggestions. Most of the councillors wanted to know how the official plan will solve the affordable housing crisis. Councillor Aylwin wanted to know why affordable housing targets have gone down in the revised plan. Councillor Kungl asked about construction activities near city borders. Councillor Harvey shared his concern of his constituents from the commercial district. And the mayor asked how the official plan is moving Barrie closer to being a complete community.
And certainly this topic is near and dear to my heart. And I can't talk about this topic without a trip down memory lane to just remind everybody that, this began in the fall of 2018. So just tipped over about 3 years worth of work, 2 years of it in a global pandemic, but we continued to forge ahead. And really, we've said from the very beginning that this was going to be a new official plan. It was not a spit polish of our 2009 official plan. It was new. And we have presented so many different drafts already to not only the public, but to the community. And that began in September of 2020 with the first version in 90 days for the community and council to take a look at it. Then we refined that version further in May of 2021, and that was the version that we did the statutory consultation, the open house, the public meeting. We refined that version even further based on those comments, and issued a tracked changes in a working version in September. We continued to whittle away and work and finesse the policy wording to a version that we issued in December 2021. And that version even changed slightly from the version that we released last week. I fully expect that there will probably be changes between the version that you got last week and what's presented to you in February for your consideration. Don't worry, all those changes will be highlighted for you and documented in the planning report. But really, as Mayor Lehman said tonight, it really was to give you a body of work to go through, to tell you why each piece is important and what it means to the official plan process, but really not asking you for any decisions this evening. And I think it's just important to note that the official plan is definitely more than one document. And to get to where we are tonight, there were several things that the city had to do. Obviously, as city staff, we guided those actions. So we had to do a municipal comprehensive review. We had to look at our land's needs. And there were certain statutory consultation requirements we had to meet. But then there were so many things in addition to that we actually did, that we did more than just tick those required boxes. Staff along with council considered employment land conversions, and that was looking at some lands that had been historically designated for employment lands that never really became employment lands. So we looked at whether or not we should reevaluate those. We had tons and tons of consultation, additional consultation, more than we certainly would need to, including up until last fall where we had the additional town hall meeting. And we've worked very closely as a development services team with the rest of the city departments. So all of those pieces kind of go together and form the official plan. And that's what we basically released late last week rather. So I'm going to go over these couple of appendices really quickly with you just to tell you, as I said, a bit about why they're important. So obviously Appendix A is the official plan, and that's the parent document, the vision between now and 2051. And that's important. And really, since this journey began, we collectively, people that municipalities in Ontario got a new growth plan, got updated population and employment targets. We adjusted our versions of the official plan to those outermost limits, those limits that we've been given by the province up to 2051, 30 years into the future, to take the city to the 298,000 people and 150,000 jobs. You are still hearing right now lots of feedback and still lots of comments on the official plan, and I'll be happy to talk to you a little about those later. The second piece that we're sharing with you is a robust document about all the consultation and engagement that took place. Again, some of these documents, some of these appendices you've seen before at different times, but given the fact, as I said, that the journey began in 2018, I'm just kind of putting the story all together again for you. So you were part of the consultation. Many of you attended our workshops and certainly attended the public meetings, so you know how much engagement went into this document, and that comes together in that Appendix B. Appendix C is totally planner ease. It's the growth plan conformity chart. It's a policy by policy tick box of what our official plan has to address and or it doesn't apply to us. The lands needs assessment is actually where we started, and that takes a look at how much land do we need to accommodate the people and jobs. And finally, the municipal comprehensive review, which also is a big document, and it takes a look at specifically, if we have these people and we have these jobs, how do we fit them in our municipality? Can we service them? And so, as I said, the January 2022 version, even changed a little bit from the December version. Continued consultation, as I said, myself and my team are still meeting with property owners and stakeholders. Despite so many eyes looking at this document, there still were some errors and some typos that we captured after we published. And we did, I did want to reflect on this. We did update the phasing policies in the secondary plan areas, in the DGA, our designated greenfield area. Council may recall that came out of discussion and direction Council gave us to look at that phasing as it tied into the long range financial plan. So the biggest change there is moving from phase to phase. We want to see registrations of draft plan approvals, not just draft plan approvals. Appendix B, again, is really quite a robust summary of all the consultation and the countless hours that we had. Again, it talks about, again, the people we had to consult with, the people we wanted to consult with, different ways to engage different members of our community and different stakeholders. And you have in there that very robust comment matrix. Someone said this, we looked at it, we made this change, or we didn't, and here's why. Lots of material in there, and it really has been quite a journey, and it's been fantastic to hear from our community and our stakeholders throughout this process. Again, the growth plan conformity chart, really, our official plan has to comply to the growth plan. You hear that from us all the time. We have to plan to 2051. We have to accommodate these people and jobs. So this really is a policy by policy check against the growth plan, and the province is going to be very interested in this part of the official plan package. The land needs study, well, it's Appendix D. It actually was one of the very first things that we did when we said, okay, now let's remember back at the very beginning, we did our lands needs based on the 2041 numbers that were a little bit less than our 2051 numbers. So we've actually had to look at our lands needs a couple times. We made a couple of changes to it and amendments. Again, all that's in Appendix D. We have our main document. We have the addendum that we made when we looked at the employment land conversion. Because land needs is all about how much land is vacant and how many people and jobs can we fit on this vacant land and fill in to get those people in our municipal boundary. That's not changing. So we did have an addendum for that. And I've mentioned before, we did get 2051 numbers just before the release of our September 2020 version. And so we did an addendum to say, how can we bridge that 10-year gap? And then finally, our Appendix E is our Municipal Comprehensive Review. And really what it does is take a look at servicing, but in the broadest sense of the word, in the sense of, we're going to have these people, we're going to have these jobs, where are they going to fit? Do we have the infrastructure? And not just water, wastewater, not just the pipes in the ground, parks, libraries, fire halls, community centers. It really looks at everything. So I want to say, if you flip through this document, you're going to see that a lot of our master plans don't go to 2051. And that's because we just got, 2051 numbers. And I want to just let everybody know that that's not every municipality in Ontario that is covered by the growth plan got the same numbers at the same time. And everybody is doing effectively the same thing we are. They're doing their lands needs. They're doing their MCRs. They can't update all their master plans at the same time. It just is practically impossible. So that's where we're taking a look at. So you'll see through there, we'll say, well, we've only planned to 2041. But again, as I say, well, this document's to take us to 2051. That's 30 years from now, and this is not going to be the last official plan. Our infrastructure team is, and our asset management team are poised to start the master plan review for all of our master plans, if not this year, the early part of next year. And as I said, we'll be able to bridge that gap of infrastructure, at least from a planning perspective, within the next couple of years. And so ultimately, I continue to say that the official plan is a foundational document. It is new, it's different. This document, while it plans to 2051, it will not be our last official plan. The Planning Act requires that municipalities look at their official plans. And again, because we know the full suite of master plans are going to be coming hot on the heels of this official plan, we know that we'll be looking at it, certainly well before 2051. So I'm going to end there. As the mayor had indicated, no decisions are being requested of you this evening. We will be coming back to you with the staff report February 8th. I know certainly some people in the community have thought that the decision was going back to council in January. That's not the case. As I said, we'll be going to planning committee February 8th, a subsequent planning committee a subsequent council meeting in February as well. And in the meantime, I encourage all members of council to use this email address that was included in the memo, but it's new.barrieop@barrie.ca, and questions will be answered and responded to all members of council, as again, much like budget.
So if you could summarize what's in this new official plan that will encourage more affordable housing in the city of Barrie.
Sure, I can definitely summarize that. And there is a section in the official plan that talks about some different things. So it does lay the foundation for us to almost as soon as this official plan gets approved, to take a look at doing an official plan amendment to do inclusionary zoning around our transit stations. Which is huge. We do have policies in here that, while we still have kept the 10% overall target, we have increased that percentage to 20% in other areas, specifically, again, around, sorry, I'm gonna look forward here. So some additional percentages in other areas, as well as proposals that have more than 40 units proposed. The intention is that it will be, that the affordable housing will be provided as part of that project. So sorry, the 20% is in the MTSAs and the UGC. So there's definitely some, while the policies previously in the existing official plan were just 10% global, there's about 3 or 4 different ways that we're trying to tackle affordable housing in the new official plan.
Yeah, I know I said I was only asked one question, but I just followed up. This explain exclusionary zoning, especially around the transit stations, what that will mean.
Sure, it's actually inclusionary zoning is the term, and that ends up being a full-on requirement to have it. It's not a target, it's not a goal, it's not a nice to have, it's a requirement.
I do have another question about the affordable housing targets and how they've changed between drafts. So we saw in an original draft higher targets, and then now they've been lowered. I'm wondering if you can explain the justification for that, considering the great need that we have in our city for affordable housing.
For sure. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Aylwin. So there was a change from the 30% in the UGC MTSA to 20%. Definitely that was that 30% number. We did get a lot of feedback from it, from people saying it was very high. So we were really trying at a staff level, trying to balance that. You know, at the same time, because so much time has transpired, we had done the annual reporting for the affordable housing, and the existing target is 10%. And a numbers by numbers statistics basis, we were actually meeting those targets, notwithstanding everything that we all know about the on the ground situation. From a perspective of a statistics perspective, we actually were meeting those targets. So really what it was just, as I said, balancing the comments that we'd heard on that first draft.
Okay, thanks for that answer. And that makes me think of a follow-up question on that piece. So if we were meeting those targets, why not try for a higher target, considering the situation, the affordable housing situation has only gotten worse?
You know, through you again, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Aylwin, it is just like pretty much everything in planning, and it's balance. It's all about balance. And as I said, really where we thought was, you know, having the same target, the 10%, increasing to 20%, adding the extra provision of more than 40 units, have to have it in-house, or sorry, as part of the proposal. And then with the full intention of doing the inclusionary zoning. We know that there's so many different ways that we want to attack affordable housing. And so, as I said, it wasn't just kind of a one thing. It was, we put so many different things to try to advance affordable housing in the city.
And my final question, just following up on the inclusionary zoning piece and the protected major transit station areas, is there any way for us to expedite that process and do it through this official plan rather than doing it through an official plan amendment?
Staff did look at that. Inclusionary zoning does require quite a bit of background supporting studies and rationale, and we just didn't think that, quite frankly, we could do it at the same time. We talked to the province about this, gosh, probably 2 versions ago, and they, you know, inclusionary zoning is still very new, and if we're all following the Toronto example really closely, you know, we're going to try to learn from their examples. So at this point, as I said, it's staff's intention for it to be OPA 1, but not at exactly the same time.
So coming hot off the heels on the task force recommendations that were ratified at council, is there anything within those recommendations where we would need to see any changes to the language in the official plan that would enable those pieces to occur? One example, like that's top of mind on this conversation of affordable units and those targets would be, you know, if we went down the route of looking at cash in lieu of affordable housing, are there firm targets to be clear about the number of units expected that we would be looking at a formula to actually calculate a cost that we would then charge to be able to reallocate those funds to different housing projects?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungl. So certainly some of the references in the official plan are captured in the affordable housing affordability task force. Cash in lieu of part of affordable housing is one. The inclusionary zoning, looking at a community benefit bylaw that our finance department is. So so a lot of those things do definitely tie in. We do understand that while the OP is the visionary document to, as I said, lay out all that foundation, there are going to be implementation pieces to the official plan that are going to be required. And this looking at how we can do the cash in lieu of affordable housing is definitely a priority.
In follow up to that, if I may, Mayor Lehman, to Ms. Banfield. So in the current OP, the language tied to affordable housing is kind of a 10% recommendation. Is there stronger language that's in this OP that sets a firm target that then we're going to be able to use to set expectations about if that's not available through a development, or is that something we're going to have to refine, just so we don't lose an opportunity should we make that change to then say, well, what was the limit, what was the target, you weren't really intentional in the document. Is there firm language that sets a target?
I through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungl, you're exactly right. The policy that we have right now is a 10% overall. And so again, it's not about per development. And if you think about this official plan, the current one being, you know, initiated around 2009, and you think about the city at that time, shifts in the built form, when we started seeing things like townhouses and the first few low-rise apartment buildings and condos, that shift in built form really was enough, if you will, to trigger those affordability pieces. And so for a long time, just our built form, the change of our built form was enough to kind of create more affordable housing. And that's not the case anymore. And that's why in this OP, we are as firm as we can be in terms of the targets, in terms of increasing them in particular areas, for sites that are greater than 40 units to have them on site, and then to reference, you know, the CBC and inclusionary zoning, and almost like every other, it's kind of like your exercise regime when you do, you know, 10 bicep curls every single day for 10 years, and then all of a sudden, like, you're stagnant. And that's kind of where we are with the affordable housing. We know that one thing is not going to be enough to really move that needle, and it's everything. We're basically, as I said, throwing every tool and resource that we have at it to try to, along with obviously the work that the task force did, and updating the strategy.
It may be more about process, not specific to just our OP, but my question is about how are we looking at or considering official plans by our bordering municipalities? So while we sit as a separate city, you know, we're definitely hearing, especially even in our town halls recently, about traffic flow based on development in bordering communities. And so how does our policy and incentives to develop, you know, while we're doing that around our boundary lines, you know, do we look at or review and forecast issues or opportunities around servicing or impact around development on our borders?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungl. So from the perspective of the official plan, you know, the official plan is obviously for the municipal for land within the municipal boundary, and we do have some policies in there that, you know, talk about, you know, seeing lower densities on our fringe, if you will, because obviously our neighbors mostly are more rural than we are. In terms of some of the stuff you're talking about, servicing and transportation, you know, those are things that are looked at more actually through our infrastructure master plans, you know, kind of infill, you know, infiltration, traffic infiltration, you know, those sorts of things. We are often approached by our neighbors to extend and look at extending our services and those sorts of things. And those are like hard services. And in some instances, council, those would always come to council. And in some instances, council have said yes. And then in other instances, council maybe haven't necessarily even been asked officially, but just kind of, but for this point, as I said, we definitely factor it all in. But the city of Barrie is really the urban center for Simcoe County, and will, you know, be more increasingly urban into the future.
My question is, can I get you to do a little more work? This plan makes a lot of changes. You know, like permissions to go to 4 stories on local or on collector roads, for example. Can you put together either a map or a very short document that is very consumer friendly, that tells people exactly what the changes are going to be? Because I want to be very sure that, you know, 6 months from now, after this is all done, people will not come to council and say, oh, gee, I had no idea that this was in the plan. So I would really love to have, and it doesn't have to be fancy, it just needs to be very consumer friendly. Do you think that's possible to do that? in the next little bit.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Ripma, absolutely. We certainly have done different things to, we have what's called like a community structure explainer, and we have that, and we have a cheat sheet in terms of which designations permit which heights, and that would be something that would be relatively easy to make into something in bite-sized pieces, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it would just be really helpful for the general public to be able to say, oh yeah, you know, I mean, as far as my property, and that's really where everybody looks at first. My property is exactly the same, or it's different in some way. So I appreciate that a lot. And the second item along the same lines is I am certain that some of the properties are going to, if you will, lose entitlements. In other words, and I don't know whether in the official plan terminology, it's not legal non-conforming, but there are some properties that are going to conform to the plan today, but will not conform in the future. And again, for those property owners, I think it's important that we identify those. So I wonder if I can ask a second favor of you, and if you could do some kind of a map or document or both that would identify those.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Ripma, you know, we have policies in the official plan that talk about existing uses continuing to be permitted. And so none of those uses that are existing today would actually factor into a legal non-conforming situation. Existing uses, we've got provisions for existing approvals and existing approvals and any other implementing approvals. So there really aren't properties that, with some very few exceptions, and I can absolutely put something together for council about, I guess, that concept of if you're losing permissions, but staff see it a little bit differently than that, but I will definitely put some thoughts together and try to crystallize, I think, what you're trying to get at.
I'm just going to actually jump in and ask a sort of supplemental on that, because I had a similar concern, and I had it brought to my attention that in the employment areas, the change in designations could result in that kind of a circumstance with the new designations of employment, sort of dash commercial and employment industrial. I guess, Ms. Banfield, based on your answer to Councillor Ripma, though, my question would be, the next step, of course, is to write a zoning bylaw to implement this plan. If the designations are changing, but existing uses are permitted to continue, how are you going to reconcile that in a zoning bylaw?
Through you, Mayor, to you, Mayor Lehman, sorry. As I said, really, staff have taken a look at that in a very, in particular as it relates to the employment land and the non-industrial, non-employment industrial and employment industrial employment. And as I said, the idea was that the zoning bylaw would obviously reflect what is permitted in the obviously in the OP designation, but there's no intention to the way the zoning bylaw is done now in terms of the industrial. It says there's industrial uses, there's some commercial uses, or institutional uses, and some of them may be permitted in different areas of the designation. But as I said, I think that the zoning bylaw really is just going to can actually do exactly the same thing. Existing uses are permitted, and then can continue to categorize the uses. The intention of this official plan was never to disadvantage existing operating plazas or entities in the city of Barrie. It really is trying to obviously provide some direction if those areas come up for redevelopment, and then obviously direction if there's some vacant land. So that's really, as I said, staff, the position is not to disadvantage existing and operating businesses, or as I said, or plazas. It really is for redevelopment and for vacant land.
Yeah, this is my question's in regards to the commercial district areas that have been designated, and more specifically on my side of the highway in Ward 7. Because through the different versions of the draft, it's the shape and size of it has changed significantly. And I've had quite a few property owners in the area obviously reach out to me with some concern, especially those that in the original draft were included because originally it went across Mapleview on the south side, and now it's been kind of enclosed more of a north-south and everything on the east side of Brine. And obviously there's some concern from some property owners that are on the west side of Brine. I'm just wondering how these borders were determined, and the rationale behind it. And like, I mean, I know from my perspective, especially with Brine Drive, because the commercial district does allow for a residential component to be built, would it not be more aesthetically pleasing to be able to have that residential component on both sides of Brine Drive, opposed to only having it on one side? I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey, thank you for the question, because it did hit a bit on what Councillor Ripma was asking about, you know, what are the exceptions that are actually, and of course, as always, when you finish the answer, you're like, oh, I should have said this. So absolutely, the commercial, I can talk to you very briefly about the commercial conundrum, if you will. So there are several properties that for sure in the first draft of the official plan we're designated commercial in the current OP, and we're designated commercial in the first draft. If you recall, after the first draft, before the first draft, but our second draft had to accommodate more people and more jobs. And so that's where we saw some of the commercial designations change to the employment area non-industrial. And so in this, not all of them, but some of them, and the boundary, I guess, if you will, was really about what was around the surrounding neighborhood. So let's use Bayfield Drive quickly as an example. A lot of that commercial designation didn't change in the previous versions. It was commercial at the beginning and it's commercial at the end. And what's the difference is because really around that are commercial uses and neighborhoods. If you use your Mapleview Drive and Brine Drive example, they were commercial, some of these sites. And then once we had to accommodate for more jobs, they did go to the non-employment area industrial. We did hear this concern. And so we said, you know what, exactly, if you're sitting there as a commercial plaza and you now have been designated as employment area non-industrial, one, it's because we recognize commercial commercial uses contribute to jobs. And two, exactly, you should be able to continue to develop in accordance with the commercial designation. And we've added that in. In addition, the neighborhood, the non-industrial actually can also be used for industrial. So this non-employment industrial can, if it's existing commercial, it can be redeveloped in accordance with commercial. It could be the non-employment industrial, or it actually can use the employment industrial. The difference is the residential. So in the areas where the commercial has switched to employment area non-industrial, it is because it's surrounded most often by employment. And we really, staff don't believe residential uses are that compatible with our industrial land. And that's, I guess, the soundbite. And if you use the Brine Drive as an example, you know, council is looking at extending Brine Drive. We want to have more employment area there. So you do have commercial district on one side of Brine, then you have the employment area non-industrial, and you move further into the industrial. So it really is a ribbon. You've heard me talk about the official plan, the land use plan being like a coloring book, and it really is a coloring book. You can see the ribbon of those land use changes, but you're right. Some existing commercial developments that are now surrounded by industrial lands, staff have said, yes, you can redevelop as commercial and intensify your commercial. Staff don't think that residential uses are appropriate there. Doesn't mean they can't bring in an official plan amendment and try to convince staff otherwise and say that residential is appropriate. But that's the story of the that's the story of how we came to be with these designations. And I do hope that makes sense to you. We have heard that loud and clear. Staff have done a lot of work on trying to make those transitions. But really the biggest change is because we had to accommodate more jobs from the first draft to the second draft, we had to go back and look at everything. And that did impact some of those property owners.
At a high level, how is this document moving us closer to being a complete community and avoiding becoming a bedroom community?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Lehman. And really it does come back to the fact that we're required to plan for people and jobs. And so some of the, so as I said, that's where it kind of comes down to. I don't think anybody's going to argue that the residential piece is, quite frankly, taking care of itself. But almost every other land use other than residential, we have to protect. And that's where you see some of those strong policies in there about, where residential uses can happen and where they can't. And so also the main themes of the whole official plan, like that's the vision. That's what we heard from our community. Our community wants us to be urban and complete. We know how important urban design is. We know how important the cycling and the mobility, the waterfront, the green city, resilient city, trying to respond to climate change, and prosperous and cultural, like those main themes of the official plan didn't come from me. It came from our community. And so that's where it all kind of comes down to. And then, we said we have identified areas in the official plan for some increased density. We, encourage mixed use in a lot of our developments. And what I like about some of the policies in our official plan is that we're talking about contextual planning, like true community planning. And if you have a development, we've got policies that say what's happening 450 meters around you. What's happening 450 meters around you is going to impact how high you should be or how dense you should be. So all of these pieces go together to make sure that all of those pieces, we have a new community hub designation that recognizes the importance of churches and schools and the value that they provide to our community, but also know that they change over time and try to put some of those policies into play. So it's something that I, certainly feel passionate about, but, all these pieces go together. And it's in particular when you get one landowner saying, I need this on my site. And I certainly don't dispute that they're speaking from the heart. But the job of the official plan is to set the vision for years to come. And it's to set the vision for the community, because obviously, every new development is an opportunity for the residential developments for people to move into our community. Every commercial development, every industrial development are more jobs. Every new church and school is a new community hub, brings in more parks and trails. As I said, it all works together, and that's why you have to read the plan all together. So I'm probably a little bit longer of an answer that you wanted, but as I said, they really all do just tie in. And, we have marching orders from the province. We have to do that. We have to kind of look this far into the future, and we have to plan for people and jobs.
The residents and businesses still have time to submit their feedback about the official plan. The purpose of the official plan is to set a vision for the next 30 years. There has been friction in recent meetings where the city's goal to expand housing opportunities collided with residents' wish not to have major development in their neighborhood. We will continue to follow this story as the council is scheduled to debate the plan in 3 weeks. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.